When I was buying a gift for my sister's wedding, an unknown number texted me. "Don't go to the wedding, run!" I called the number, and what I heard shocked me. True story. My phone buzzed while I was staring at a diamond bracelet for 20 minutes, trying to decide if $15,000 was too much or exactly right for the sister who practically grew up in my arms. The text came through at 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday in late September. Unknown number. "Don't go to the wedding. Run." I didn't move. I just stood there with my phone in one hand and my credit card in the other, feeling the air conditioning blow cold against the back of my neck. The saleswoman, Margot, according to her name tag, was smiling at me with that patient, practiced expression that said she'd seen people hesitate over expensive gifts before. She probably thought I was reconsidering the price. She had no idea I was reconsidering everything. I read the message 3 more times. Each time the words stayed exactly the same. Each time my stomach dropped a little further. "Don't go to the wedding. Run." "Ma'am." Margot's voice was gentle. "Would you like me to wrap the bracelet?" I looked up at her, then back down at my phone. My thumb hovered over the call button. I wanted to dismiss it as a prank. Some bored teenager with a random number generator. Some cruel joke from someone who knew just enough about my life to aim for the softest spot. But something about the message felt too specific, too urgent. "I'll be right back," I said. And I walked toward the front of the store where the noise from the street made it easier to pretend I was alone. I hit call. It rang once. Twice. 3 times. Then it went to a generic voicemail, the kind that just repeats the number back to you in a robotic monotone. I hung up and stared at the screen. My reflection ghosted over the unknown contact. My face looked pale in the glass, older than 42, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I called again. This time, someone picked up on the 4th ring. There was a long pause, just breathing on the other end, and then a man's voice, low, strained, like he'd been holding his breath for days. "Amelia." I froze. He knew my name. "Who is this?" My voice came out harder than I expected, sharp and defensive, but my hands were shaking. Another pause. Then, "It's Graham. Graham Lewis." I felt the floor tilt under me. Graham Lewis. I hadn't heard that name in almost 4 years. Not since he'd left the firm under a cloud of accusations and legal threats. Not since the night he'd called me from a hotel in Denver and told me he couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't fight them. Couldn't stay. I thought he'd disappeared. I thought he'd given up. I thought, honestly, that he might be dead. "Graham," I repeated, because I needed to hear myself say it out loud. Needed to make it real. "Where the hell have you been?" "Amelia, listen to me." His voice cracked, and I could hear something behind it. Fear, maybe, or exhaustion so deep, though it sounded like grief. "You can't go to that wedding? You can't. They're going to..." He stopped, and I heard him take a shaky breath. "They're going to destroy you." I pressed my back against the window, feeling the cool glass through my blouse. Outside, people walked past with shopping bags and coffee cups, living their normal, uncomplicated lives. Inside, my entire world was tilting off its axis. "Who?" I asked. even though some part of me already knew. Who's going to destroy me? Your sister, Graham said. And her fiancé, Amelia. They've been planning this for months, maybe longer. I only found out because... He stopped again, and this time I heard something that might have been a sob or a laugh, I couldn't tell which. I found the documents, the guardianship papers, the medical evaluations. They're going to have you declared incompetent right after the wedding. They're going to take everything, the company, the assets, all of it. And by the time you figure it out, it'll be too late. I couldn't breathe. The words kept coming, but they didn't make sense, didn't fit together into anything I could understand. Lydia. My little sister. The girl Bethel I'd practically raised after Mom and Dad died in that car accident when she was 12 and I was 23. The girl I'd put through college, helped through breakups, supported through every crisis and celebration for the last 19 years. That's insane, I said. But my voice sounded hollow even to me. You're lying. You have to be lying. I wish I was. Graham's voice broke again, and this time I was sure it was a sob. Amelia, I'm so sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry. I should have told you sooner, but I didn't know how, and I didn't have all the proof. And I thought maybe I was wrong, maybe I was seeing patterns where there weren't any. But then I found the flash drive and... What flash drive? I cut him off, because I needed something concrete, something I could hold on to. Graham, what are you talking about? He took another shaky breath. I've been living in Montana, off the grid mostly, trying to stay out of sight after everything that happened at the firm. But I still have contacts, people who owe me favors. One of them works in estate planning law. He called me 3 weeks ago because he'd seen something that didn't add up. A guardianship petition for a woman who, according to public records, runs a multi-million-dollar engineering firm and has no history of mental illness or incapacity. The woman was you, Amelia. The petitioners were Lydia Brooks and Caleb Moore. I felt my knees go weak. I slid down the window until I was sitting on the floor of the jewelry store, my back pressed against the glass. My phone clutched so hard against my ear that it hurt. That's not possible, I whispered. Lydia wouldn't... She's my sister. She loves me. She loves your money more. Graham's voice was flat now, exhausted of emotion. I started digging. It wasn't hard once I knew what to look for. Caleb Moore is in debt up to his eyeballs. Student loans, credit cards, a failed startup that's being sued for fraud. Your sister's been out of work for 6 months. They need your money, Amelia, and they've been planning how to get it. I closed my eyes. The thing about betrayal is that you don't see it coming. Or maybe you do, and you just refuse to look. I thought about the last few months. Lydia's sudden interest in my business, her questions about my estate planning, the way Caleb always steered conversations toward my investments. I'd thought they were just trying to be involved in my life. I'd thought it was affection. The wedding's in 2 days, I said quietly. What am I supposed to do? Don't go, Graham said immediately. Get a lawyer. Get your assets protected. File for a restraining order if you have to. But whatever you do, don't go to that wedding. If you walk into that room, you're walking into a trap. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling of the store, white and smooth and perfect, the kind of surface that had never been touched by anything ugly or complicated. Somewhere behind me, I could hear Margot asking another customer if they needed help. The world kept turning. People kept buying jewelry. And I was sitting on the floor of a store in downtown Portland, realizing that my sister wanted to steal my life. "Send me everything," I said. "Every document, every piece of evidence, every scrap of proof you have. Send it to my personal email, not my work one." "Amelia." "Send it, Graham." My voice came out cold now, steady, the voice I used in boardrooms when someone tried to undercut me. "And then tell me where you are. Because if this is real, if this is actually happening, then I need to know who else is involved. I need to know how deep this goes." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'm in a town called White Sulphur Springs. It's about an hour north of Helena. There's a motel called the Crossroads Inn, room 14. "I'll be there tomorrow," I said, and I hung up before he could argue. I sat there on the floor for another minute, maybe two. My mind was racing, but my body felt numb, disconnected, like I was watching myself from somewhere outside my own skin. Then I stood up, smoothed down my skirt, and walked back to the counter where Margot was waiting with the diamond bracelet still laid out on its velvet tray. "I'll take it," I said. She smiled, relieved. "Wonderful choice. Would you like it gift-wrapped?" "Yes," I said. "Make it beautiful." Because if I was going to that wedding, and I was, despite Graham's warning, because I needed to see it for myself, needed to look Lydia in the eye and know for certain, then I was going to do it right. I was going to play the role I'd been playing my whole life. The devoted older sister, the protector, the one who always showed up with the perfect gift and the perfect smile. And if it turned out Graham was telling the truth, then that wedding was going to be the last place Lydia and Caleb ever tried to play me for a fool. I paid for the bracelet. Margot wrapped it in silver paper with a white silk ribbon, and I carried it out to my car like it was something precious, instead of something I might regret. The drive back to my house in the West Hills took 25 minutes through rush hour traffic, and I spent every second of it trying to breathe normally, trying to think clearly, trying not to scream. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun was starting to set. My house, a mid-century modern I'd renovated myself, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows, looked exactly the way I'd left it that morning. Safe, solid, mine. I walked inside and set the bracelet on the kitchen counter, then poured myself a glass of wine I didn't drink. Instead, I opened my laptop and checked my email. Graham had already sent the files. There were 43 attachments. PDFs? Mostly. Scanned legal documents, medical evaluations, financial records. I opened the first one and felt my stomach turn. Petition for guardianship of an incapacitated person. Petitioners: Lydia Ann Brooks and Caleb Jamesmore. Respondent: Amelia Rose Brooks. I scrolled down. The petition claimed that I was suffering from severe depression and early-onset dementia, that I was no longer capable of managing my own affairs, that I posed a danger to myself and potentially to others. It cited erratic behavior, financial mismanagement, and deteriorating mental health. It included statements from 2 doctors I'd never met, both of whom claimed to have evaluated me and found me incompetent. It was dated 3 weeks ago. I opened the next document. It was a copy of my will, or rather, a forged version of my will. This one named Lydia as my primary beneficiary and gave her power of attorney over all my assets in the event of my incapacity or death. The signature at the bottom looked like mine. It wasn't mine. The third document was an invoice from a private investigation firm. Services rendered, background check, asset search, surveillance. Subject: Amelia Rose Brooks. Client: Caleb Moore. They'd been watching me, following me, documenting my life so they could dismantle it piece by piece. I went through all 43 files. By the time I finished, it was past midnight, and I was shaking so hard I had to sit on the floor with my back against the kitchen cabinets just to keep myself upright. The evidence was overwhelming. The plan was meticulous, and it was all designed to take effect within days of Lydia's wedding. Because what better time to act than when I would be distracted, emotional, and surrounded by family who would assume I was just overwhelmed by the occasion. I thought about calling Lydia right then, confronting her, screaming at her until she told me the truth. But I didn't, because if I did that, she would know I knew. She would lawyer up, destroy evidence, maybe even accelerate the timeline. And I couldn't let that happen. If Graham was right, and everything I'd just seen suggested he was, then I needed to be smarter than they were. I needed to document everything, build my own case, and wait for the right moment to strike back. I thought about the bracelet sitting on my counter in its perfect silver wrapping. I thought about the wedding in 2 days. And I thought about the look on Lydia's face when she realized I wasn't the fool she thought I was. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen, and I started making a plan. The first thing I did was call my lawyer, Patricia Hollis, a woman I'd worked with for years and trusted implicitly. I called her cell at 6 in the morning, knowing she'd be up, because Patricia was the kind of person who started her day with a 5-mile run and a triple espresso. "Amelia?" She sounded surprised but not annoyed. "Everything okay?" "No," I said. "I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it quietly. Can you come to my house? Now." There was a pause, then, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. She arrived in 15, wearing running gear and carrying a leather briefcase. I let her in, poured her coffee, and handed her the flash drive Graham had sent overnight via secure upload. "Read everything on this," I said, "and then tell me what my options are." Patricia took the drive, plugged it into her laptop, and started reading. I watched her face go from curious to concerned to furious in the span of 10 minutes. When she finally looked up at me, her jaw was tight. "This is fraud," she said flatly. "It's conspiracy. It's identity theft. Amelia, if even half of this is real, your sister and her fiancé are looking at serious criminal charges." "It's real," I said. "I've verified as much as I can. The doctors listed in those evaluations. I've never seen them. The signatures on those documents, not mine. And Caleb Moore's financial records show exactly what Graham said. He's drowning in debt." Patricia leaned back in her chair. "Okay, so here's what we do. First, we file a preemptive injunction to block any guardianship petition. Second, we notify the court that these documents are fraudulent and request an investigation. Third, we freeze your assets temporarily so they can't be moved or accessed without your explicit consent. Fourth, no?" I interrupted. She frowned. "No? Not yet." I took a breath. "Patricia, if we do all that now, They'll know I'm onto them. They'll destroy evidence, flee, or find some other way to screw me over. I want them to think they've won. I want them to walk into that wedding believing everything's going according to plan. And then I want to take them down in front of everyone they've ever lied to. Patricia studied me for a long moment. Then she smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile I'd never seen before. "You want revenge?" she said. "I want justice," I corrected. "But yes, I want them to feel exactly what they were trying to do to me. I want them to lose everything." She nodded slowly. "All right, but we do this smart. We document everything, record everything, and make sure we have airtight evidence before you make any moves. Because if you're going to blow up your sister's wedding, Amelia, you'd better make damn sure the bomb doesn't backfire." We spent the next 6 hours planning. Patricia contacted a private investigator she trusted, a former FBI agent named Marcus Reeve, who specialized in financial crimes. He agreed to surveil Caleb and Lydia for the next 48 hours, recording their movements, conversations, and any interactions with the people named in the forged documents. Meanwhile, Patricia prepared emergency legal filings that could be submitted the moment I gave the word. And I started compiling my own evidence. Emails, text messages, voicemails, anything that might corroborate what Graham had found. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal. That afternoon, Lydia called me to go over last-minute wedding details. She sounded happy, excited, completely at ease. She asked me if I'd picked up her gift yet, and I told her yes, it was beautiful. She was going to love it. She thanked me and said she didn't know what she'd do without me, that I was the best sister anyone could ask for. I wanted to vomit. Instead, I smiled into the phone and told her I loved her, and that I couldn't wait to see her walk down the aisle. When I hung up, I sat on my couch and cried for the first time since Graham's call. I cried for the sister I thought I had, for the family I thought we were, for the 19 years I'd spent believing that love was enough to keep us safe. I cried because betrayal doesn't just hurt, it unmakes you. It takes every memory and rewrites it. Every moment of kindness turned into a calculation. Every hug turned into a manipulation. If you've ever loved someone who turned out to be a stranger, you know what I mean. You know how it feels to look back at your own life and realize you were living in a story someone else was writing. I let myself cry for an hour, and then I dried my eyes, washed my face, and got back to work. Marcus Reeve sent his first report that evening. He'd followed Caleb to a law office downtown, the same firm listed on the guardianship petition. Caleb had spent 2 hours inside, then left with a file folder tucked under his arm. Marcus managed to photograph the folder through the office window. Inside were more forged documents, including a revised version of my will that gave Lydia and Caleb even more control over my estate. The next morning, Marcus followed Lydia. She went to a bank, then to a real estate office. She was looking at houses, expensive houses, the kind that cost $3 or $4 million. She'd told me last week that she and Caleb were planning to rent a small apartment after the wedding to save money. Apparently, that was another lie. Patricia compiled all of this into a digital file, time-stamped and legally admissible. By Friday morning, the day before the wedding, we had enough evidence to bury them. But I still wasn't ready to act. Not yet. Because I needed to hear it from them. I needed to know, beyond any shadow of doubt, that this was real. That they had actually planned to destroy me. so I did something reckless. I invited Lydia and Caleb to dinner. They arrived at my house at 7, both of them dressed casually, both of them smiling. Caleb brought a bottle of wine. Expensive. Something he probably couldn't afford. Lydia hugged me and told me I looked tired, asked if I was feeling okay. I told her I was fine, just stressed about work. She nodded sympathetically and said she understood, that running a business must be so hard. I wanted to throw her out. Instead, I poured the wine. We sat in my living room, the three of us, and I let them talk. Lydia went on about the wedding, about how perfect everything was going to be, about how she couldn't believe this was finally happening. Caleb chimed in with jokes and compliments, playing the charming fiancé. And I watched them, studied them, looking for cracks in the performance. Then I asked the question I'd been planning all day. So what are you two going to do after the wedding? Any big plans? Lydia glanced at Caleb. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. A flicker of something, nervousness maybe, or calculation. We're thinking about traveling, Caleb said smoothly. Maybe Europe. Lydia's always wanted to see Paris. That sounds expensive, I said, keeping my tone light, casual. How are you planning to afford that? I thought you were saving money by renting. Another glance. This one lasted longer. We have some savings, Lydia said, and Caleb just got a new job. It pays well. Really? I smiled at him. Congratulations. What kind of job? He hesitated for just a second. Then, consulting. Tech consulting. It's a startup, so it's a little risky, but the potential is huge. I nodded, taking a sip of wine. That's great. You know, if you ever need financial advice, I'm happy to help. I've been managing my own investments for years. It's tricky, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually kind of fun. Lydia laughed, too loud, too bright. You're so generous, Mel. Honestly, I don't know what I'd do without you. And that was when I knew. Not because of what she said, but because of the way she said it. There was a performance in her voice, a rehearsed quality that made my skin crawl. She wasn't talking to her sister. She was talking to a mark. I excused myself to the kitchen, saying I needed to check on dinner. But instead, I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app Patricia had installed that morning. I hit record and slipped the phone into my pocket, letting it capture everything. When I came back, I changed the subject. Can I ask you something? I said, sitting back down. Hypothetically, if something happened to me, like if I got sick or had an accident, what would you do? Lydia frowned. What do you mean? I mean, I'm the only family you have left. If I couldn't take care of myself, who would take care of me? She looked uncomfortable now, shifting in her seat. Caleb put a hand on her knee, a gesture that might have looked supportive if I hadn't known better. We'd take care of you, Lydia said finally. Of course we would. You're my sister. And what about my business? My assets? Someone would have to manage all of that. I guess we'd figure it out, she said carefully. With lawyers and stuff. I don't really know how that works. I leaned forward. But hypothetically, if I'd named you in my will or given you power of attorney, you'd have access to everything, right? You could make decisions on my behalf. Caleb's expression shifted, just slightly, but enough. He looked at Lydia. then back at me. "I suppose," he said. "But that's pretty morbid, Amelia. Are you feeling okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "I'm just thinking about the future. You know how it is. Once you hit 40, you start realizing you're not invincible anymore. Things happen. Accidents happen. Health problems happen. And I want to make sure Lydia's taken care of if something happens to me." Lydia's eyes widened. "Mel, you're scaring me. Is there something you're not telling us?" I shook my head. "No, nothing like that. I've just been thinking about estate planning lately. My lawyer keeps bugging me to update my will, make sure everything's in order. And I realized I haven't really talked to you about any of it." There was a long pause. Then Caleb said, very carefully, "Well, it's smart to plan ahead. You've worked hard for everything you have. You should make sure it's protected." "Exactly," I said. "Protected." The word hung in the air between us. Lydia tried to change the subject after that, steering the conversation back to the wedding, but the damage was done. I'd seen the look in their eyes, the hunger, the calculation, and I'd recorded every word. They left around 10. Lydia hugged me goodbye and told me she loved me. Caleb shook my hand and said he was lucky to have me as a sister-in-law. And then they walked out my door, probably congratulating themselves on how well they'd played me. I waited until I heard their car pull away. Then I locked the door, pulled out my phone and listened to the recording. It wasn't a confession. Not quite. They were too smart for that. But it was enough. Combined with everything else Patricia and Marcus had compiled, it was enough to destroy them. I called Patricia. "Tomorrow," I said when she picked up. "At the wedding. That's when we do it." She didn't argue. "I'll be ready." I didn't sleep again that night. Instead, I sat in my living room with all the lights off, staring out at the city below. And I thought about what I was about to do. Part of me wanted to back out, to pretend I'd never seen the evidence, to let Lydia have her wedding and deal with the fallout later. Because no matter how much she'd betrayed me, she was still my sister. She was still the 12-year-old girl I'd held at our parents' funeral. Still the college student I'd helped through her first breakup. Still the woman I'd spent 19 years trying to protect. But then I thought about those documents. The guardianship petition. The forged will. The surveillance reports. I thought about how meticulously they'd planned this. How long they'd been lying to me. How close I'd come to losing everything. And I realized it's something. Love doesn't mean letting someone destroy you. Love doesn't mean being complicit in your own betrayal. Sometimes love means saying enough. Sometimes love means walking away. And sometimes love means fighting back. The wedding was at 3 o'clock at a vineyard outside Portland. A sprawling estate with rows of grapevines and a stone terrace overlooking the valley. Lydia had chosen it because it was beautiful and expensive, and I'd paid for it because that's what I always did. I showed up early, carrying the silver-wrapped bracelet and wearing a dress I'd spent too much on, and I smiled at the guests as they arrived. 200 people, most of them Lydia's friends, a few of them mine. They greeted me warmly, told me how proud I must be, asked me how it felt to see my little sister getting married. I told them it was surreal. I told them it was overwhelming. I told them I was happy. I didn't tell them the truth. Patricia arrived at 2:30, dressed like a guest, blending in perfectly. She found me near the bar and handed me a small flash drive. Everything's on here, she said quietly. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence. If you change your mind, I won't, I said. She nodded. Then good luck. The ceremony started at 3. I sat in the front row, watching Lydia walk down the aisle in a dress that cost more than most people's cars. She looked beautiful, radiant even. Caleb stood at the altar, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. And maybe he thought he had. The vows were traditional, sweet, full of promises about love and partnership and forever. I listened to every word, and I wondered how many of them were true. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, everyone applauded. Lydia kissed Caleb, and the two of them turned to face the crowd, beaming. I clapped along with everyone else, and I waited. The reception was held on the terrace. There was a sit-down dinner, champagne toasts, a string quartet playing soft classical music. I sat at the family table next to Lydia, playing my role perfectly. I laughed at jokes, posed for photos, and accepted compliments on the bracelet I'd given her. She'd opened it before the ceremony and cried, said it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. She was wearing it now, the diamonds catching the late afternoon light. I wondered how long it would take her to realize what it represented. Dinner ended around 6. Then came the speeches. Caleb's best man went first, telling a story about their college days that was funny and charming and probably at least half true. Then Lydia's maid of honor, who talked about how much Lydia deserved this happiness, how hard she'd worked, how lucky Caleb was. Then it was my turn. I stood up, glass in hand, and the room fell quiet. 200 faces turned toward me, expectant and warm. Lydia looked up at me from her seat, smiling, trusting. Caleb had his arm around her shoulders. I took a breath. I've been thinking about what to say today, I began, my voice steady. About how to sum up 19 years of being Lydia's sister, protector, and sometimes parent. About how to capture what it feels like to watch her grow up, to help her through hard times, to celebrate her victories. And the truth is, I don't think I can. Because our relationship isn't something that fits neatly into a speech. People nodded. A few of them smiled. But I can tell you this, I continued. I've spent most of my adult life trying to give Lydia the things our parents couldn't. Stability, support, a future. I've given her money when she needed it, advice when she asked for it, and love even when she didn't deserve it. The smiles faltered slightly. Lydia's expression shifted. Just a flicker of confusion. And in return, I said, my voice growing colder, she's given me something too. Something I didn't ask for and didn't want. But something I think everyone here should know about. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Then I pulled out a small adapter and walked over to the sound system where the DJ was standing. He looked confused, but I smiled at him and asked if I could borrow the microphone for a moment. He handed it over. I want to play something for you, I said, connecting my phone to the speakers. A recording. It's from 3 weeks ago. The voices you're about to hear are my sister, Lydia, and her husband, Caleb. Lydia stood up, her face going pale. Mel, what are you... I hit play. The sound that came through the speakers was crystal clear. A conversation recorded in what sounded like a car. Lydia's voice, bright and excited. Do you really think we can pull this off? Caleb's voice calm and confident. Of course, she trusts you completely. She won't see it coming. Lydia, and the doctors, they're definitely going to sign off on the evaluations. Caleb, already paid for. They'll say whatever we need them to say. Severe depression, early dementia, incapable of managing her own affairs, the whole package. Once the guardianship goes through, we'll have access to everything. Lydia, how long do you think it'll take? Caleb, a few weeks, maybe a month. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. And even if she tries to fight it, who's going to believe her? We'll have doctors, lawyers, legal documents. All of it will say she's incompetent. Lydia, laughing, God, I can't believe we're actually doing this. It feels surreal. Caleb, think of it as reclaiming what's rightfully yours. She's had all that money for years, and what has she done with it? Built a business, made investments. That's your inheritance, Lydia, your future. She's just been hoarding it. Lydia, you're right. You're absolutely right. She's had her turn. Now it's ours. The recording stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked out at the crowd. Every face was frozen in shock, horror, disbelief. Some people had their hands over their mouths. Others were staring at Lydia and Caleb like they were seeing them for the first time. Lydia was standing now, her face white, her hands trembling. That's not, Mel, that's not what it sounds like. Isn't it? I said, my voice echoing through the speakers. Because it sounds to me like you and your husband were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent, so you could steal my company and my assets. It sounds to me like you forged legal documents, bribed doctors, and hired investigators to surveil me. It sounds to me like you've been lying to me for months, maybe years, and that this entire wedding was just a distraction, so I wouldn't notice what you were doing. Caleb was on his feet now too, his face red. You can't prove any of that. That recording is out of context. Out of context. I laughed, and it came out bitter and sharp. Okay, let me provide some context. I pulled the flash drive from my purse and held it up. On this drive, I said, are 43 documents. Guardianship petitions with forged signatures. Medical evaluations from doctors I've never met. Revised wills I never signed. Financial records showing Caleb's debts and your plans to use my money to pay them off. Surveillance reports tracking my movements. Real estate searches for multi-million-dollar homes you were planning to buy with my assets. Every single piece of evidence you need to understand exactly what they were trying to do. I looked directly at Lydia. Her eyes were wide, filling with tears. You were my sister, I said quietly. I raised you. I loved you. I would have given you anything you needed. All you had to do was ask. Mel, please. Her voice broke. But you didn't ask, I continued. You didn't trust me. You didn't respect me. You saw me as a resource to be exploited, a problem to be solved, and when I became inconvenient, you decided to erase me. I turned back to the crowd. I want all of you to know something, I said. I've already contacted my lawyer and filed emergency injunctions to block the guardianship petition. I've reported the forged documents to the police. I've frozen my assets so they can't be accessed or moved. And I've donated the entirety of my estate, every dollar, every asset, every investment, to a charitable trust. As of this morning, Lydia and Caleb can't touch a cent of it. Not now, not ever. Gasps rippled through the room. Lydia made a sound like she'd been punched. "So congratulations," I said, looking at her one last time. "You got your wedding, you got your husband. But you don't get my money, you don't get my company, and you don't get to pretend you're the victim here." I set the microphone down, grabbed my purse, and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted for me like water, everyone too stunned to move or speak. Behind me, I could hear Lydia sobbing, hear Caleb shouting something I didn't bother to listen to. But I didn't look back. I walked down the stone steps, past the rows of grapevines, and out to the parking lot where Patricia was waiting by my car. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought about it. I thought about the weight that had been pressing on my chest for weeks, the fear and betrayal and rage that had kept me awake at night. And I realized it was gone. Not all of it. Wounds like that don't heal overnight. But enough. Free, I said. Patricia smiled. "Good, because we have a lot of work to do. The police want to interview you tomorrow, and we need to finalize the trust paperwork. But for tonight, you should go home. Rest. Let yourself breathe." I nodded. "What about Lydia and Caleb?" "They'll face charges," Patricia said. "Fraud, forgery, conspiracy, probably more once the DA gets involved. It's going to be ugly, Amelia. Are you ready for that?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I know I'm not going to let them get away with it. Not anymore." I drove home through the sunset, the sky painted orange and pink and gold. My house was quiet when I got there, empty in a way it hadn't been before. But it didn't feel lonely. It felt mine. I poured myself a glass of wine. This time I actually drank it, and sat on my couch, looking out at the city lights below. Somewhere out there, Lydia and Caleb were probably tearing apart what was left of their wedding, trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong. Part of me felt sorry for them. Part of me didn't. Mostly, I just felt tired. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. Texts from people who'd been at the wedding. Emails from reporters who'd somehow already heard about the story. Voicemails from distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. I ignored most of them. But there was one message I did read, from Graham Lewis. "I saw the news," it said. "You did the right thing. I'm proud of you." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Thank you for everything." He didn't respond, and I didn't expect him to. Graham had given me the information I needed, the push I needed, and that was enough. Whatever happened next, I'd face it on my own terms. The police interview was straightforward. I showed them the evidence, played them the recordings, walked them through the timeline. They took notes, asked clarifying questions, and told me they'd be in touch. A week later, Caleb was arrested on fraud charges. Lydia wasn't charged, not yet, but the investigation was ongoing. I didn't attend the hearings. I didn't read the articles. I didn't answer Lydia's calls or respond to her letters, because the truth is, there was nothing left to say. She'd made her choice, and I'd made mine. A month after the wedding, I received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was the diamond bracelet I'd given Lydia, still wrapped in its silver paper, the ribbon slightly crushed. There was a note tucked inside. "I'm sorry," it said, in Lydia's handwriting. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I needed to say it anyway. I held the bracelet for a long time, feeling the weight of it in my hands. Then I put it in a drawer and closed it. I didn't throw it away. I couldn't, not yet. But I didn't need to look at it either. Because here's what I've learned. Betrayal doesn't end when the truth comes out. It doesn't end when justice is served or when apologies are offered. It ends when you decide you've carried it long enough. When you decide that the person who hurt you doesn't get to define your story anymore. Lydia stole 19 years of my love, my trust, my faith in family. She tried to steal my future. But she didn't succeed. And that's what matters. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you love, you know how hard it is to let go. How easy it is to keep replaying the hurt. To keep asking yourself what you could have done differently. To keep hoping they'll become the person you thought they were. But the truth is, you can't save someone who's already decided to destroy you. All you can do is save yourself. So that's what I did. I saved myself. I rebuilt my company, stronger than before. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected while I was focused on taking care of Lydia. I traveled, took up painting, started volunteering at a youth mentorship program for kids who'd lost their parents. I lived. And slowly, over months, and then years, the wound began to heal. Not completely. Wounds like that leave scars. But scars are just proof that you survived, that you fought back, that you refused to let someone else's cruelty define you. 3 years later, I received another letter from Lydia. She was divorced by then. Caleb had fled the state to avoid prosecution, and she'd annulled the marriage. She was working as a paralegal, living in a studio apartment, trying to rebuild her life from scratch. The letter was longer this time, more detailed. She talked about therapy, about accountability, about how much she regretted what she'd done. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask for money. She just asked if someday I might be willing to talk to her. I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to say yes, to give her the chance she was asking for. But another part of me remembered standing on that terrace, holding that microphone, watching the life she'd tried to steal crumble around her. In the end, I wrote back, just one line. I hope you find the peace you're looking for, but I can't be part of that journey. I sent the letter and deleted her contact information. And this time, I didn't cry, because I'd already mourned the sister I thought I had. I'd already grieved the family I thought we were. And I'd already moved on. People ask me sometimes if I regret what I did and if I regret exposing Lydia at her own wedding. If I regret destroying her life in front of 200 people. And my answer is always the same. No. Because she didn't just try to take my money. She tried to take my autonomy, my dignity, my voice. She tried to erase me so completely that I wouldn't even be able to fight back. And if I'd let her get away with that, if I'd stayed silent, if I'd played the victim, if I'd let her win, then I wouldn't have been saving our relationship. I would have been enabling her to destroy me. So no, I don't regret it. Not for a second. What I did wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life. It was about standing up and saying, this is where it ends. You don't get to do this to me. You don't get to take what I've built, what I've earned, what I've survived. Not anymore. And if that makes me the villain in Lydia's story, I can live with that. Because in my story, I'm the one who walked away. I'm the one who fought back. I'm the one who survived. And that's the only story that matters. It's been 5 years now since that wedding. 5 years since I stood on that terrace and played that recording. Since I watched Lydia's face crumble. Since I walked out into the parking lot and felt the weight lift off my shoulders. 5 years of rebuilding, of healing, of learning how to trust again. I still live in the same house in the West Hills. I still run my engineering firm, though it's bigger now, more successful. I still drink wine on my couch and watch the city lights, still think about the past sometimes when I'm alone. But I don't dwell there anymore. I don't let it define me. Because here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the beginning of a new one. A story where you're the author, where you're in control, where you decide what happens next. Lydia's betrayal could have destroyed me. It almost did. But instead, it taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn. That love isn't about sacrifice. It's about boundaries. It's about knowing when to hold on and when to let go. It's about protecting yourself even when it hurts. I don't hate my sister. I don't even think about her most days. But I also don't miss her. Because the person I miss, the girl I raised, the sister I thought I had, never really existed. She was a story I told myself, a fiction I clung to, because it was easier than facing the truth. And the truth is this: some people will love you as long as you're useful, as long as you're giving them what they need. But the moment you stop being useful, the moment you become an obstacle instead of an asset, they'll find a way to remove you. That's not love. That's parasitism. And I refuse to be anyone's host ever again. So if you're reading this, if you're going through something similar, if someone you love has betrayed you, used you, tried to erase you, I want you to know something. You don't owe them forgiveness. You don't owe them a second chance. You don't owe them anything except the truth. And sometimes the truth is painful. Sometimes it's ugly. Sometimes it means standing up in front of 200 people and playing a recording that will destroy someone's life. But here's what I've learned. Your peace is worth more than their comfort. Your future is worth more than their forgiveness. Your life is worth more than their lies. So tell the truth. Protect yourself. Walk away if you have to. Fight back if you must. And know that on the other side of that pain, there's a version of you who's stronger, wiser, and free. That's the version of me I've become. And I wouldn't trade her for anything. Not even for the sister I thought I had. Not even for the family I thought we were. Because in the end, the only family that matters is the one you choose. The one that chooses you back. The one that shows up not because they need something from you, but because they want to see you thrive. I've found that family now. In friends who love me without conditions. In colleagues who respect me without expecting me to sacrifice myself. In strangers who've heard my story and told me theirs, who've reminded me that I'm not alone in this, that betrayal is a wound we all carry but don't all survive. I survived. And if you're reading this, if you're in the middle of your own betrayal, your own heartbreak, your own impossible choice, you can survive too. You will survive. And someday, you'll look back at this moment and realize it wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning of the one you were always meant to write. The one where you're the hero. The one where you save yourself. The one where you walk away from the fire and into the light. Stronger and scarcer and finally free. That's my story. And it's yours too, if you want it. All you have to do is take the first step. All you have to do is say enough. All you have to do is survive. The rest will follow, I promise. There are things I didn't tell you yet. Things that happened in those 5 years that matter. Because healing isn't linear, and justice isn't always clean, and the aftermath of betrayal is messy in ways you don't expect. The first year was the hardest. Not because of Lydia, though her absence left a hole in my life I hadn't anticipated. Not because of the legal proceedings, though those dragged on for months. But because I had to learn how to exist in a world where I couldn't trust my own judgment anymore. If I'd been so wrong about Lydia, if I'd missed all the signs, all the red flags, all the moments when she was lying to my face, then how could I trust myself to make good decisions about anything? That question kept me up at night for months. I second-guessed every friendship, every business deal, every conversation. I replayed interactions in my head, looking for hidden meanings, searching for betrayals that might not even exist. I became paranoid in a way I'd never been before. Suspicious of kindness, wary of vulnerability. Patricia noticed first. She called me into her office 3 months after the wedding and closed the door. "You're spiraling," she said. Not a question. A statement. I started to deny it, but she held up a hand. "I've been watching you, Amelia. You're working 16-hour days. You're not returning calls from friends. You're micromanaging your staff in ways you never did before. And last week, you fired your assistant because you thought she was asking too many questions about your schedule. She was literally just doing her job." I sat down heavily in the chair across from her desk. "I don't know how to do this," I admitted. "I don't know how to just move on. Every time I think I'm okay, something reminds me of what happened. And I'm right back there on the floor of that jewelry store, reading that text message." Patricia leaned forward. "You need therapy, professional help. Not because there's something wrong with you, but because what happened to you was traumatic. Betrayal trauma is real, Amelia. And you can't just white-knuckle your way through it." I resisted at first. The idea of sitting in a room with a stranger and talking about my feelings seemed ridiculous, indulgent. But Patricia was persistent. She gave me the names of 3 therapists who specialized in family trauma and betrayal. And eventually, I made an appointment. Dr. Sarah Chen's office was in a quiet building downtown, decorated in soothing blues and grays. She was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with kind eyes and a directness I appreciated. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Tell me what brings you here," she said. And I did. I told her everything. The text message, Graham's call, the forged documents, the wedding, the recording. All of it spilled out in a rush of words I hadn't realized I was holding back. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then, "You did something incredibly brave. You know that, right?" I shook my head. "I destroyed my sister's wedding. I humiliated her in front of everyone she knows. I'm not sure brave is the word I'd use." "You protected yourself," Dr. Chen said firmly. "You gathered evidence, you planned carefully, and you exposed people who were trying to exploit you. That took tremendous courage, but I'm hearing something else in your voice. Guilt. Do you feel guilty for what you did?" I stopped. Did I? Sometimes. Yes, because no matter what she did, she's still my sister Bunny. and part of me wonders if there was another way, a quieter way, a way that didn't involve destroying her life. Let me ask you something, Joy Chen said. If you'd confronted her privately, shown her the evidence, and asked her to stop, do you think she would have? I thought about Lydia's face in the recording, the casual way she'd laughed about stealing my life. No, I said quietly. No, I don't think she would have. Then you did what you had to do, not what you wanted to do, what you had to do to survive. And that's not something you should feel guilty about. We met twice a week for the first 6 months. Dr. Chen helped me understand that what I was experiencing wasn't just sadness or anger. It was grief. I was mourning the loss of someone who was still alive, mourning a relationship that had never really existed, mourning the version of myself who'd believed she was safe. She taught me about something called betrayal blindness, the psychological mechanism that keeps us from seeing betrayal even when the signs are obvious, because acknowledging it would be too painful. She explained that it wasn't my fault for not seeing what Lydia was doing. My brain had been protecting me from a truth I wasn't ready to face. That helped. Not all at once, but gradually. She also taught me how to rebuild trust. Not just in other people, but in myself. How to differentiate between intuition and paranoia. How to set healthy boundaries without shutting everyone out. How to forgive myself for being human. The legal proceedings were their own kind of torture. Caleb was arrested on multiple charges: fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted theft by deception. He posted bail and immediately tried to flee to Canada. He was caught at the border and ended up spending 3 months in jail before his trial. Lydia wasn't charged initially. The DA argued that she'd been manipulated by Caleb, that she was a victim too. I wanted to scream when I heard that. But Patricia explained that proving Lydia's intent would be difficult. The recordings showed her participating in the planning. But a good defense attorney could argue she was just going along with Caleb's ideas, that she didn't fully understand what they were doing. It made me furious. But there was nothing I could do except wait. Caleb's trial lasted 2 weeks. I testified for an entire day, walking the jury through the documents, the recordings, the timeline. Caleb's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, as someone with a grudge who'd fabricated evidence. But the forensic analysis of the forged documents was damning. The handwriting experts confirmed the signatures weren't mine. The medical professionals testified they'd never evaluated me. The jury convicted him on all counts. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. And Lydia? She disappeared. She left Portland 2 weeks after Caleb's sentencing. No forwarding address, no goodbye. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved somewhere on the East Coast, maybe Boston or Philadelphia. Someone else said they'd seen her working at a coffee shop in Seattle. I didn't try to verify any of it. I didn't want to know. But the not knowing created its own kind of void. There was no closure, no final confrontation, no moment when she looked me in the eye and acknowledged what she'd done. She just vanished, leaving me with all these questions I'd never get answers to. Why? That was the big one. Why had she done it? Was it just the money? Or was there something deeper? Resentment, jealousy, some old wound I'd inflicted without realizing it. Had she always hated me, or had Caleb corrupted her? Had there been a moment when she could have chosen differently, or was this inevitable from the start? I'd never know. and Dr. Chen told me I had to make peace with that. "You're looking for a reason that makes sense," she said during one of our sessions. "Something that would help you understand. But sometimes people do terrible things for reasons that aren't rational or understandable. Sometimes people betray us simply because they can, because it serves their needs, because they've decided we're expendable, and that's about them, not about you." In the second year, I started to feel more like myself. Not the version of myself who'd existed before the betrayal. That person was gone, and I'd mourned her enough. But a new version. Someone harder, maybe. More careful, but also stronger. I hired back my assistant and apologized. I stopped working 16-hour days. I started saying yes when friends invited me out. I went on a few dates. Nothing serious, but enough to remind myself that connection was still possible. I also made a decision about the charitable trust I'd created. I'd set it up in anger as a weapon to hurt Lydia and Caleb. But now I wanted it to mean something. I wanted it to do good. I worked with Patricia to restructure it as a foundation focused on supporting young people who'd lost their parents. We provided scholarships, mentorship programs, grief counseling. We partnered with schools and community organizations. And slowly, it became something I was genuinely proud of. Something that transformed my pain into purpose. There's a moment that stands out from that second year. I was at a foundation event, a scholarship awards ceremony for high school seniors. One of the recipients, a girl named Maria, gave a speech about losing her mother to cancer when she was 14, and how the foundation's support had helped her stay in school and plan for college. She was poised and articulate, but I could see the grief under the surface. The same grief I'd carried after losing my parents, the same grief I'd tried so hard to protect Lydia from. After the ceremony, Maria came up to me. "Miss Brooks," she said, "I just wanted to thank you. Not just for the scholarship, but for understanding what it's like. My guidance counselor means well, but she doesn't really get it, you know. She keeps telling me that things will get better, that time heals all wounds, but your foundation is different. It acknowledges that losing a parent changes you, that you don't just get over it." I felt tears prick my eyes. "You're right," I said. "You don't get over it. You learn to carry it. And some days, it's heavier than others." "Exactly," Maria said. "And that's okay. That's what your foundation taught me. That it's okay to still be sad. That grief doesn't have a timeline." After she walked away, I stood there in that hotel ballroom, surrounded by students and their families, and I realized something. This was what healing looked like. Not forgetting what happened. Not pretending I wasn't hurt, but taking that hurt and transforming it into something that mattered. Lydia's betrayal had tried to erase me, but instead, it had forced me to rebuild myself into someone stronger, someone more intentional, someone who could use her pain to help others. In the third year, Graham Lewis came back. I'd thought about him occasionally over the past few years, wondered if he was still in Montana, if he'd managed to build a new life, if he ever thought about what his phone call had set in motion. But I hadn't tried to contact him. He'd given me the information I needed, and then disappeared back into whatever quiet existence he'd built for himself. I'd respected that. But one Tuesday afternoon in November, 3 years almost to the day after the wedding, he showed up at my office. My assistant buzzed me. "Miss Brooks?" "There's a Graham Lewis here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important." I stared at the phone. Then, "Send him in." He looked different. Older, more weathered. His hair had gone grey at the temples, and there were deep lines around his eyes. But he had the same quiet intensity I remembered from our days working together at the firm. "Amelia," he said, standing in the doorway like he wasn't sure if he was welcome. "Graham." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Sit, please." He sat, hands folded in his lap, looking uncomfortable. We were quiet for a long moment. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to see me," he said finally. "I'm not sure either," I admitted. "But you're here. So talk." He took a breath. "I've been following what happened. The trial, the foundation, all of it. And I needed to tell you something. When I made that phone call 3 years ago, when I sent you those files, I almost didn't do it." I frowned. "Why not?" "Because I was scared," he said. "Scared that I was wrong, that I was ruining your relationship with your sister over nothing. Scared that you'd hate me for getting involved. Scared that if I came back into your life, even just for a moment, I'd drag all my old baggage with me." He looked down at his hands. "I spent years running from what happened at the firm. From the accusations, the lawsuits, the way everyone looked at me like I was toxic. I built a whole new life in Montana specifically so I could forget. And then I got that phone call about the guardianship petition, and suddenly I had to decide. Do I stay hidden, or do I risk everything to help you?" "Why did you?" I asked quietly. "Help me, I mean?" He looked up and his eyes were wet. "Because you were the only person who believed in me. Back at the firm, when everyone else thought I'd embezzled those funds, when they were all convinced I was guilty, you were the only one who looked at the evidence and said, 'This doesn't add up.' You fought for me, Amelia. You tried to clear my name even when it cost you politically. And then when I ran anyway, when I gave up and disappeared, you never once judged me for it." I'd forgotten about that. Or maybe I'd just filed it away in the category of things decent people do, not realizing it had meant so much to him. "So when I found out what your sister was planning," Graham continued, "I knew I had to tell you. Even if it meant coming out of hiding. Even if it meant risking exposure. Because I owed you. And because..." His voice broke. "Because you deserved to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt." We sat there in silence. Then I said, "Thank you. I never properly thanked you for what you did, but thank you. You saved my life, Graham." He shook his head. "You saved your own life. I just gave you the information. What you did with it, the way you fought back, the way you've rebuilt since then, that was all you." "Stay," I said impulsively. "In Portland, I mean. There's a position open at my firm, senior engineer. It's yours if you want it." He looked startled. "Amelia, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering. You're brilliant, Graham. You always were. And you've been hiding long enough. It's time to come back." He was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Okay. Yes. Thank you." Graham joined the firm 3 weeks later. And having him there, someone who understood, who'd been through his own betrayal and survived, made a difference I hadn't expected. We didn't talk about Lydia often, but knowing he was there, that he'd seen me at my worst and still believed in me, helped. In the 4th year, I started dating someone seriously. His name was Daniel Chen, no relation to Dr. Chen, though the coincidence had made both of them laugh. He was an architect, divorced, with a teenage daughter. We met at a fundraiser for the foundation. I almost didn't go on that first date. The idea of letting someone get close enough to hurt me again felt terrifying. But Dr. Chen had been pushing me gently toward this for months. "You're not going to heal by staying isolated," she'd said. "At some point, you have to risk connection again. Not because you owe it to anyone, but because you deserve it." So I said yes when Daniel asked me to dinner. And then I said yes to a second date. And a third. And before I knew it, we'd been together for 6 months. Daniel was patient with me in ways I didn't know I needed. He didn't push when I pulled away. He didn't take it personally when I needed space. He understood that trust was something I had to rebuild slowly, piece by piece. One night, about 8 months in, we were having dinner at my house. I'd cooked, something I rarely did, but Daniel had mentioned loving homemade pasta. So I'd spent the afternoon making it from scratch. We were sitting on the couch afterward, wine glasses in hand, when he said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you ever think about reaching out to your sister?" I tensed immediately. Why would I do that? "I'm not saying you should," he said quickly. "I'm just curious. It's been 4 years. Has she ever tried to contact you?" "Once," I admitted. 3 years ago. She sent me a letter. Apologized, sort of. Asked if we could talk someday. I told her no. "Do you regret that?" I thought about it. No, because I don't think she's sorry for what she did. I think she's sorry she got caught. There's a difference. Daniel nodded slowly. "My ex-wife," he said after a moment, "cheated on me for 2 years before I found out. When I confronted her, she cried and apologized and swore it meant nothing. And for a while, I considered trying to make it work. For our daughter, mostly. But then I realized something. She wasn't sorry about the affair. She was sorry about the consequences. Sorry she had to face me. Sorry people would judge her. Sorry her life was disrupted. But the actual betrayal, she'd do it again if she thought she could get away with it." "What did you do?" "I filed for divorce. And I've never regretted it. Because staying with someone who hurt you to avoid the pain of leaving, that's not love. That's self-destruction." I leaned against him. "Thank you for understanding. Thank you for letting me in," he said. In the 5th year, this year, something unexpected happened. Lydia tried to sue me. She filed a civil suit claiming that I'd defamed her, that I'd intentionally inflicted emotional distress, that I'd destroyed her reputation and her livelihood. She wanted damages, a lot of damages. Patricia called me the day the papers were served. "She's delusional," Patricia said flatly. "The truth is an absolute defense against defamation. Everything you said at that wedding was backed up by evidence. This is a frivolous lawsuit. It'll get thrown out." "But she's actually doing this," I said, staring at the court documents. "After everything, she's actually trying to make herself the victim." "Some people never take responsibility," Patricia said. They'd rather rewrite history than face what they've done. The case never went to trial. The judge dismissed it on summary judgment, ruling that my statements at the wedding were protected because they were true and made in the context of self-defense against an ongoing threat. Lydia was ordered to pay my legal fees. But the lawsuit itself felt like a violation. Like she'd reached across 4 years and 4 states to hurt me one more time. I called Dr. Chen the day the case was dismissed. She hasn't changed, I said. After all this time, all the consequences, she's still trying to blame me. Does that surprise you? Dr. Chen asked. I thought about it. No, not really. I think part of me always knew she'd never take responsibility. But I guess you hoped she'd become the person you wanted her to be. Dr. Chen said gently. The sister you deserved. But she's not that person, Amelia. She never was. And that's not your fault or your failure. That's just reality. So what do I do now? You keep living your life. You keep building the things that matter to you. You keep connecting with people who treat you with respect. And you let Lydia live with the consequences of her choices. That's all you can do. So that's what I've been doing. Living. The foundation is thriving. We've helped over 300 students in the past 5 years. My company landed 2 major contracts this year. Daniel and I are talking about moving in together. Graham is happy, settled, back to doing the work he loves. And me? I'm happy too. Not in the uncomplicated way I was before. That kind of innocence is gone forever. But in a deeper, more hard-won way. The kind of happiness that comes from surviving something that should have destroyed you and choosing to build something beautiful anyway. I still think about Lydia sometimes. Wonder where she is, what she's doing, if she ever thinks about me. But those thoughts don't have the same power they used to. They're just echoes now, fading a little more each year. Because here's what I know now, what it took me 5 years to fully understand. You can't control whether people betray you. You can't protect yourself from every hurt, every lie, every person who decides you're expendable. What you can control is what you do next, how you respond, who you become. Lydia's betrayal was meant to erase me, to reduce me to something manageable and exploitable. But instead, it forced me to become someone stronger than I ever knew I could be. Someone who sets boundaries. Someone who trusts herself. Someone who knows her own worth and refuses to settle for less than she deserves. That person, the one I am now, is someone I'm proud of. Someone I like. Someone who can look in the mirror and know she did everything she could to protect herself, to seek justice, to rebuild. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not forgetting what happened. Not even forgiving the people who hurt you. But becoming someone who can carry the weight of what happened without being crushed by it. Someone who can acknowledge the pain without being defined by it. That's who I've become. And no one, not Lydia, not Caleb, not anyone, can take that away from me. So yes, I destroyed my sister's wedding. I exposed her betrayal in front of 200 people. I donated away the fortune she wanted to steal. I've refused her attempts at reconciliation. I've built a life that doesn't include her, and I'd do it all again. Not because I'm vindictive, not because I'm cruel, but because I'm free. Free from the weight of her expectations. Free from the obligation to sacrifice myself for someone who saw me as a resource. Free from the story she wanted to write about who I was and what I was worth. I'm free. And that, more than any revenge, any justice, any vindication, is worth everything.